And we're live here to talk about the recent anti-Semitic attacks against the Jewish Labor Bund using Dr. Weisfeld as their specific target to slate said movement. We're going to first go through the press release and then talk about another positional point that has been released by the comrades of Dr. Weisfeld in support of Weisfeld's voice still continuing to be heard, because there has been a censorship of socialist materials produced by the Bundist movement, by the Zionists, using this situation as an excuse to engage in anti-intellectualism, behaviors typically found in fascism, Nazism, the what's it? And where's my brain going blank? I'll just fucking get on with it and we'll fucking see where things go. Fucking can't remember. Communique de presse. Charge of mischief, graffiti under £5,000 charge of the Criminal Code of Canada made by the Montreal CGA Federation Combined Jewish Appeal. One Cummings Square. I'm sorry. That's a funny name. I know who it's named after, but it still makes me laugh. Charges against Dr. Abraham Weisfeld, PhD, Administrative Secretary of the Alliance of Concerned Jewish Canadians, a Socialist Bund chapter of the socialistbund.net, doctor in political science from the Université du Québec at Montreal. I don't speak French, so I probably butchered that, but what do you expect? I'm part English to some degree, so there is going to be some fucking up of the French. Concerning the writing of, quote, writing of, quote, and a free Palestine, end quote, on the Israel Day parade sign in front of the Jewish Community Center of Montreal. This case is the issue of censorship of the Jewish community members whom chose to criticize or oppose the governments of the State of Israel. The specific charge against Dr. Abraham Weisfeld, PhD, is an action against the Canadian Jewish Socialist Bund chapter by the political ideology propagated by the Zionist Party representatives in the Montreal CGA. The initial court hearing on August 21st of 2023 will begin the defense of the Jewish Bund, national organization against the pro-Zionist domination of Jewish community. Dr. Abraham Weisfeld is a second-generation Holocaust survivor whose parents fled from Warsaw and Lublin in Poland. The Jewish Bund was and is the Jewish civil rights movement that chose to resist fascism rather than abstain. It should also be noted that Weisfeld is currently applying for Polish citizenship under the right of return law of Poland. Currently, the governor of Warsaw refuses to recognize Jewish refugees as citizens of Poland for the lack of a passport identification, which was impossible to obtain during the Nazi occupation of Poland. The indictments will be in French. Accusation de mefat graffiti de moins de $5,000 du Code criminel du Canada porté Pale. I'm sorry.
Oh,
You stick
Jesus
some fucking
Christ.
foreign stuff in front of me, and I'm gonna try and read it. Um, Le Erector und Palestine Libre. I'm gonna stop. But like,
Yeah. Essentially, it's basically, yeah, just it's translated to what was, I think, up in the starting, the English version, just basically the charge of graffiti under 5,000 of the Criminal Code of Canada that was made by the Federation of Combined Jewish Appeal. Um, I also there was a statement that was also released by the Jewish Bund, well, by the Alliance of Concerned Jewish Canadians. They uphold the academic and Jewish rights of Administrative Secretary Dr. Abraham Weisfeld, PhD, to be heard by the Jewish community in particular and the general public as well. Such censorship is reminiscent of Communist Party control mechanisms as well as right-wing fascist practices. Such repression of the Jewish Bundist perspective is merely the dogmatic and sectarian efforts of declining ideological positions held by the Zionist lobby in Canada and elsewhere. We appeal the academic community to voice their concerns against censorship in this case, as well as supporting the general freedom of expression or political expression in particular. So, yeah, basically, it was about last week was when we heard from Weisfeld himself that he was being pursued, that criminal charges were being pursued against him um, by yeah, by these Zionist lobbies in Canada who basically got all butthurt because he spray painted "Free Palestine" on a freaking poster that costs what, literally $1 Canadian,
which
which,
is like
you
what,
know, I'm
10p?
probably like, yeah, like let me actually do like the conversion
It's
here, right?
a $1 Canadian goes to about 50 cents, so it's about 30 something pence, 40 something pence.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah. Yeah, because it's about showing about, yeah, it's showing about three quarters basically in the United States. So it's like literally something like I don't even know anything in the United States, or at least not where I live, where I can buy something for $1, much less 75 cents anymore. I don't even think I can get a freaking waffle cone for that anymore.
There are places where
And
you can buy
it's
it,
like,
but the stuff is horrible. Aldi will sell you shit for $1, but it's the Germans ripping you off with some dodgy crap.
but yeah, it's just this whole thing is ridiculous, and it's like literally, if they're that butthurt, it's like hell, I'll fly to Canada myself just to hand them, three, U.S. quarters and be just kind of like, suck it up, Buttercup, like
Three US
it's not.
quarters, don't spend it all in one place. I mean,
It's like,
the sign at
yeah, if
most
you fuck a
would be
bitch just
worth
like.
the sign at most would be worth $20. It couldn't be worth any more than that. And it depends on whether it's made
Exact.
and it's out of paper. If it's made out of paper at home, it's $1. Because you're spending about like, I mean, this is a community center, so they're buying paper in bulk. So that's gonna cost them fuck all. If it's a wooden sign, it ain't gonna cost more than $20, $30. um the fines are
Yeah.
going to end up coming up at something like a few $100 at the cheapest. It's in the 5 grand ratio, so like anywhere from $1 to 5 grand he could be charged. Normally minimum charges for crimes are about 50 to $100 or pounds or whatever weird smackaroonies you use as coins.
Yeah.
um
That's literally, I think that this whole thing is just, a ploy for them to essentially get free money, out of somebody by, using the bourgeois legalist system to get what they want. And that was
there's
what we were kind of talking
it's
about like a
not
week
so
ago.
much just about that. They're also doing civility politics in the same way that
Well, yeah.
like a lot of transphobes do to us as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, well, and that's the very thing too. They're using those civilian and bourgeois legal means to essentially, um, you know, go after people that they disagree with, people who are in leftist circles, and it's in the very to be quite honest, it's in the same vein that a lot of these right-wing fascists in America are currently going after the LGBT community, and it's just in this case, it's just a lot more underhanded and
It's
vile
a
is
lot
what.
less violent with this one is. But I would match it up to the way that Republicans attacked people protesting abortion rights recently. It's civility politics.
Yeah,
It's politics that claims that if you do anything that isn't petitioning the government, you're violent, you're uncivil, and therefore must be dealt with. That's what
yeah,
mischief laws were literally designed to do. There is no such thing as being too mischievous at a protest. If you're too mischievous at a protest and you're causing trouble, the people that want shit done are going to beat your ass into the high heavens. No one is going to take your shit that's going to ruin their chances of getting their things if you're going to be fucking bashing about. Like, there is no need to civil protest. Protest does not have to be civil. It can be as aggressive as it wants to be. Weisfeld, what they did is incredibly light. Like, it's so pathetically light it shouldn't even be considered a thing. The sign should have been taken down and it should have been shrugged off. But because it's also
yeah,
vandalism, although it's act of protest vandalism, which does is it's supposed to have different connotations to it, but that is being forgotten about because it's not being treated as civil protest. It's being treated as him wantonly protesting, as if he's not backed by an
yeah.
entire group of Jewish people that have discern with the laundering of Israeli fascism over the Jewish community in Canada. Um, and civility politics is violent. It's very violent because what it does is it
Yeah,
puts its boots on the heads of people in the lower class and has us stumped out. And people like Weisfeld, who are in better positions, whom are like PhDs and intellectuals, well, what they'll do is with people like that. And Weisfeld worked his fucking ass off to get to where he is. He's gone through fucking all sorts of different fucking degrees of poverty and struggle. They'll strip him of his ability to do what he needs to do. They're not going to strip him of his PhD. What they'll do is they'll strip him of his intellectual accessibility to the Jewish community in Canada as much as they can.
and
Um,
essentially strip him of his pretty much of his ability to his ability to collect an income, pretty much, because like you know a lot of what he does is trying to, well, he's a professor, he's a teacher, he's an educator. That's what he
oh,
does,
he's
and
already
they're
he's
going
already
they're
blacklisted when it comes to universities. Like he
yeah,
yeah, no, like no. What I'm saying is they're not going to affect his like his PhD position. They're going to affect his relationship to the Jewish community. That's all they can do.
yeah,
This point comes here. Jewish Public Library refuses to accept donation of Weisfeld's book, the Federation of Palestinian and Hebrew Nations, second edition. Note here the translation of police notice that, quote, also on April 18th, 2023, you left a copy of your book, quote, the Federation of Palestinian and Hebrew Nations, second edition, end quote, at 5151, Chem de la Côte Sainte Catherine, Montreal, butchered. Your book was given to me because they do not wish to add it to their library collection, and I would like to deliver your book to you with your approval by mail. End quote. This unprecedented censorship of a Jewish academic's book by the Jewish Public Library is in contradiction with the stated purpose of a library and a Jewish library in particular. Considering that I already have 3 books accepted by the library, one is obliged to consider that this decision is purely political and not academic. Such an action corresponds to the recent complaint to the police concerning the words "and a free Palestine" written on an Israeli Day parade poster placed. Yeah, it's a poster, so dirt cheap. It was probably printed on a fucking inkjet printer, probably a buck. Um,
probably
uh,
like an HP or something. Yeah.
Holy penis. But the Israeli Day poster placed on the public domain in front of the Jewish Community Center, which houses the Jewish Public Library. Um, and then it gets into what Pagan had read prior into the Alliance Concerned Jewish Canadians. And that we appeal to the academic community to voice their concerns against censorship. In this case, as well as supporting the general freedom of expression or political expression in particular. I'd have used and that instead of or rhymes like works as well. Sorry, but I'd have said and that of political expression in particular.
Yeah.
Having an autism moment, I'm like, I could rearrange these words. I'm telling you.
Yeah.
But yeah, the situation is very much that I mean, Weisfeld's already a blacklisted person when it comes to PhD stuff. His work is centered on the stuff he does um, within his socialist activities for the most part, and then other small bits of work. Like he doesn't get to do lectures and stuff and teaching. The guy has been blacklisted. Um, and so Weisfeld is already in a situation where he is isolated from the academic community in a way. He's already been getting a lot of disrespect from people he used to academically relate to and have relationships with. But that's not the topic of this video. Um, what the what the Israelis are trying to do here, the interests of Zionist fascism, is to completely silence him from the Jewish community because his books stand in stark contradiction to the positions they want to push. It's the same shit that they've done with people in the past, like Finkelstein. It's pushing them out of the purview of the Jewish community. To be fair, Finkelstein has fallen off his rocker in recent years, but like it's trying to isolate them from the Jewish community as either terrorists, anti-Semites, or something in between. To suggest that Weisfeld is taking some anti-Semitic position in this situation is just hilarious. Not only for his strong connections with his Jewish and Palestinian heritage, the guy is a second generation Holocaust survivor, as said before, had family that were freedom fighters in Warsaw and Lublin. Like the the guy's the guy's heritage is fighting fascism, fighting anti-Semitism, specifically fighting the damn Nazis. And so this entire
Yeah.
accusation, it holds no academic grounds. It is a purely political motion that they don't want a pro-Palestinian Jewish intellectual who's a part of a socialist movement having a voice in the Jewish community.
Yeah, basically, all of it is a combination of, anti-communism, and anti-socialism. It's a, and and as much as they will not admit it, it is, anti-Semitic towards, someone that has, frankly, in my opinion, way more clout than they do. Because, like, what have these people done? What have these people actually, like, some of them might have ancestors that were Holocaust survivors, but, and some of them might, have done certain work, but they chose to end up at the end of the day siding with Zionist fascists rather than, supporting an actual cause of togetherness, of equality, and, an actual, like, legit solution to the problems. And that is, basically, the cohabitation with, the Palestinian people, and, bringing peace with the Palestinian people. Instead, they're choosing to side with that, with the perpetrators of genocide and, frankly, apartheid. And Dr. Weisfeld stands in the way of that. And basically, anybody who stands in the way of the Zionists' plans, or, especially if they are also, fellow Jewish people, yeah, they're gonna basically attack them and try to claim, oh well, they're the ones that are being anti-Semitic. They wrote "Free Palestine" on one of our posters. It's like, okay, take the poster down, shred it, and put another one up, you freaking crybabies! Like freaking, like fuck off.
Uh, I mean, Palestinians were like the OG Arabs, and they were fucking Semites the whole time. They have fucking been in. They've been in fucking Palestine,
Yeah,
like for fucking thousands of years. So like,
and last time I checked, Jesus was a Jew, and Jesus was also a Palestinian Jew. Like,
well,
so
we
it's one of
don't
those
know.
things.
Like, as far as we know, he was
Yeah,
part Greek and part Summit. Like, he's maybe Palestinian. He might be fucking somewhere else around the region. He's a
yeah,
I mean, he's a made up dude as far as we know. Like, there's like one scholarly piece that was like maybe suggests he was around, but yeah.
yeah. Well, yeah, there's like a few like little, things throughout history that suggest that he was either a real person or was based on a real person. Like that would be funny to me, is if,
Everything
the
we
whole
know
concept of
about him,
Jesus
if he
is
is
based on a
real,
true
comes
story.
from Romans. Everything we know comes from Romans.
Yeah.
Either the Romans
But
themselves, or the Romanists that came after them, the Christians, the European
yeah,
Christians. And so, like,
like literally,
even if he was real, we don't have an accurate representation.
Canisius goes, it's like Jesus is also of mixed race too. So, yeah.
We
And that,
like if he existed, he was definitely part Greek. That's all we really
yeah.
know. Which
And
I mean,
yeah,
that's like most people in that region because Greek colonization of there during the Greek Empire.
but yeah, it's just, yeah, this whole situation that has faced Weisfeld is, all the idea that, he committed some heinous act of mischief, some heinous act of vandalism, or an anti-Semitic act. It's like the man, spray painted or wrote some graffiti on a $1 poster. It doesn't, it's just like, you don't have to make an entire, you don't have to essentially make an entire crucifixion, out of out of out of this whole situation. And instead, yeah, they decide that they want to basically just like nail this guy to the fucking cross. And it's just, and just because he simply stands in that, in direct contrast to their views, and that he stands in, and that he also is a fellow, a fellow Jew who basically, who who is a socialist, who is standing up for the Palestinian people, who believes that, hey, maybe an entire country shouldn't be committing genocide and ethnic cleansing against an entire group of people, because, that's kind of what happened to us, during the Nazi regime, and two wrongs don't exactly make a right.
And I gotta
So,
correct, they wouldn't have been mixed race because race didn't exist in 0 AD. Race is
well,
a
yeah,
pseudo science made up by white people. Um,
yeah,
and religious pointations mean nothing in this situation. Like, it's the actual core foundation of a colonial relationship. And what we see
yeah,
in this situation is the Palestinians, people of a Semitic ethnicity, um, are being anti-Semitized by another Semitic group. Well, actually, several different Semitic groups that make up the Israelis. There is a whole conflictory situation that's going on there between these two groups where they're weighing in anti-Semitism. Oh, you're against the Holocaust. You're against this, but like, no, the like
yeah.
fucking hell. Yes, there were Semites that were involved in this shit. There were Arab groups that involved themselves with Hitler. There were
Yeah,
German groups that involved themselves with Hitler. Like, I don't know, the rest of the fucking Nazis and the massive support they had in the German middle class. So like,
Yeah.
are we like are the Israelis going to throw Germany away? Germany's such a big ally to them. Are they going to throw them away? Are they going to throw the British away, who've been anti-Semites forever, who massively helped the Nazis come to power? Are they going to fucking throw the Americans away? No. But the Palestinians, they'll fucking weigh in all the time that the leadership of Palestine was involved with the Nazis. And what? That's not the
Right.
Palestinian people. It makes no logical sense. And Semites can be anti Semitic. We see this with the Israelis themselves.
There
Um,
there were Jewish collaborators, with the Nazis that, literally, turned on their own fucking people, and that's, so yeah, and frankly, I would even, kind of say that in a way, the idea of the whole concept of Zionism was kind of, I mean, it's always kind of been there as a concept as well, but I think after the war, it kind of got popularized and streamlined because they essentially took certain aspects from the Nazis, from those Jewish collaborators, and they basically just have used it for the last, 70 years to persecute the Palestinian like Arabs that live there.
so, like,
Um,
these things were already a part of Zionism. Zionism was
yeah,
already an excelling form of proto-fascism in the late 1800s. Well, actually, mid to late 1800s. Herschel and all his shit. But like, yes, they did
yeah,
learn from the Nazis. But it's they learn more mechanicalistic forms and industrialized forms of genocide from the Nazis. Their actual core philosophy
yeah.
comes from America, not from Germany.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Literally,
yeah.
that's what
You kind
Kissinger.
of
I swear it was Kissinger. Kissinger went and met with Afal al-Assad and turned around to him and went, "The Israelis see you in the way we see the native." Well, they said the Indian,
yeah,
but I'm trying to be a little less racist about it.
yeah. Well, there is nothing subtle about Kissinger, that's for sure. I can't wait for that motherfucker to die.
Like,
Anyway, but I think apparently Comrade Net had also said that Palestine is the Holy Land. It's not a Jewish homeland. Exactly. It is never necessarily been solely just, it's just solely a Jewish ethno state. It
it
is that,
was
it is
it was inhabited by other people before the Jews originally settled there. Like,
exactly like, and it's just, and yet Zionists basically treat it like, this is like, the the land of the Jews, and that it's always been the land of the Jews, and it's like, no, it is a holy site, that is for certain, but it's not intrinsically yours.
it's been
And
the holy site for
and a
more than
lot of,
just Abrahamic groups because everywhere is a holy site. That's why I wouldn't
exactly,
default to
like,
any argument of like holy lands or anything because it's a meaningless statement. Every land is holy to a certain group. So like,
and even before it was a holy land, there was, different, I would say, I would call them pagan, but, basically there were different like religious groups that, were going on there long before Judaism even became a thing. So it's like, so yeah, it's not anything special. It's not, some, holy Jewish, you know,
it's
sacred
it's
site.
it's land. Like, to
Yeah.
be simple about it, it's land that people live on. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
and the Palestinians were living there for a very long time before Zionism turned around and came over, as well as Jewish people living there too. There's this thing called Mizrahi everyone forgets about.
Yeah.
And like, it's
Uh,
why I don't like defaulting to any argument about the three Abrahamic religions and their holy relationship to there, because there are more than just Abrahamic people living in that region. So it's such
yeah.
like there's only so far such a defaultion can come before it starts dwelling into the realms of idealism. Um, at the end of the day, the land is a land that is Palestinian, is Arab, but is also of a lot of other mixed descents. A lot of people don't speak about the Assyrians in this area. Because since the Assyrian
Yeah.
genocide, everyone just likes to forget about the Assyrians as much as possible. So I always say the Assyrian genocide is the forgotten genocide, because a lot of people will say the Armenian is the forgotten one, but everyone remembers the Armenian one because it's the first one anyone brings up when they think about a forgotten genocide. And so the Assyrian one is the one people are really forgetting. Um,
Yeah.
and it was the really big thing that when those Kurds propped up and they were fucking what was it, the YPG, I think, or YPK, I can't remember,
Yeah.
the motherfuckers that were massacring fucking Assyrian and Islam and Arab people. um
Oh yeah. Yeah, I can't think of the name of it either right now. Um, Net also chimes in, Zionists and Nazis only unite because of their hatred of Torah culture, not because they like each other. The Torah culture also warns throughout the Jewish Bible and the Jewish Talmuds that not to disgrace the land. I know I probably butchered that pronunciation,
I
which the Zionists do indeed disgrace. It is more than just Abrahamic religion in the Holy Land. That is true. Yeah, like they, well, and that's the whole concept of it too, is that, the Zionists are basically kind of like a lot of Christian fundamentalists in the Western world, but we'll use America as a perfect example, who essentially take, like to cherry pick, the good parts that pander to their ideology, but everything else that's in this case in the Torah, they just like to basically be like, well, I don't believe in that. That's not what what they meant by this. And it's just kind of like, no, that, like, if you're going to be going by your holy texts, you need to be reading the whole thing and conceptualizing it, as a whole, and not just cherry picking, the stuff that you like. And and that's why, in a lot of ways, I say that religious Zionists are essentially, they're religious, they're religious fundamentalists. I think I've probably spoken
they
on that before, like pre-transition videos where I stated that essentially it's Jewish fundamentalism.
Well, it's like Judeo-Christian fundamentalism. Like it's but more primarily Jewish than American Judeo-Christianity. But
Right.
like a lot of Jews and who follow American Judeo-Christianity, they use a lot of Christian terminology to describe a lot of things. But Zionism is a little smarter in how it deploys these things, and there is a heavy Jewish fundamentalism that goes into it. Um, the what's it? Um, but there's a lot of different frameworks to get into here. So like, the point I'm making is that it's not just more than the Abrahamic religions. It's more than just religious people in general that exist within a region. So calling anything the Holy Land in a political discussion is detrimental. It's Palestine. Like it has a name, just use it.
Yeah.
Like, secondly, the situation in regards to the Nazis, yes, they do both hate the Torah and it does bring them together, and they do both have hatred towards each other. That's not the only thing that brings them together. It's a class interest, it's a political interest. That's the driving force.
Yeah.
Their cultural interminglings are massively a part of it too, and are in many ways primary. But the actual core thing that brought the Nazis and the Zionists together was their hatred of the communist movement and the crippled nature of European imperialism at that era, the Great Depression. If it wasn't for the Great Depression, if it wasn't for the rise of communism, these groups would have been fighting each other come the war, not allying with each other. And so, as much as they
Yeah.
hate the Torah, they would not have united on their hatred of the Torah. They'd be competing to whom hates it more. Or one would be showing that,
Yeah.
like, they totally hate it less, even though they actually hate it. Like Zionists tend to do. Like, they tend to like to pay lip service, but nothing more. And then as soon as someone finds a verse in it that they don't like, they disown it. It's like Christians with the Old Testament. they'll constantly go on about how much they still like the Old Testament and it should be kept up. And you can just bring up quotes for hours that like, but it doesn't really mean that. It's not really true. It's kind of different. You're misinterpreting it, even though you're reading it verbatim. The rape, the murder, the torture shit, the fucking weird way God fetishizes just hurting people. Like the Old Testament's fucked. So like
Yeah,
yeah. So like it's not the religious framework that makes the Nazis and the Jews hate each other. Like sorry, come together, like work together, want to work together. Actually, that's a point of hatred between them because as much as the Jewish, the Zionists hate the fucking Torah, they still pay lip service to it. They still want to act like they're the followers of it. They're the real Jews, and anyone that doesn't like
yeah,
them is the pseudo Jews. So like that actually creates a point
yeah,
of
like the
tension
holier,
between these two
like
groups. What brings them together is a class interest for fascism against the communist
yeah,
movement.
they're basically, in a sense, the holier than thou sort of
Yeah, you
scenario, the
fucking
holier than thou
you
people.
evangelicals.
Yeah, the people that's just like, no, your way is wrong, my way is right, and and if you don't, agree with that, then I'm going to, beat you over the head with, the butt of a rifle. I
People that read the Bible like fucking Joseph Smith reads his golden plates.
Yeah. Oh God.
In the middle of the woods
Yeah.
with their eyes closed doing drugs.
Yeah. Oh God. It's just this whole situation was just it was absolutely ludicrous. And so when we actually ended up when this was published by the Jewish Bund last week that Weisfeld was um, being pursued criminally for mischief or whatever bullshit it is. It's one of those things that it's like we as it was really nice to see us as a community actually like strongly coming together in support for him because in a time where we've got so much just divide that's been going on, this inner leftist infighting and stuff like that. It's one of those things where it's nice to see a group of people that are actually coming together and actually supporting this man, even if like they don't know much about him, even though they even if they don't even if they've never really been associated with the Jewish Bundist movement or, with the intercommunalist convergence. It's one of those things where um, that has been a really great thing to at least see come out of this, something that's at least positive. And, regardless of what happens, you know, Dr. Weisfeld is definitely very loved and very well respected within this community. I think that has been pretty well solidified in this last week. And, honestly, yeah, I really have nothing much to add on that part of it except solidarity with Comrade Weisfeld.
Solidarity with Comrade Weisfeld, and we've got to like understand the situation that comes here, the struggle that's needed to be had, the different groups that we need to form, united struggles with when it comes to fighting against these things. The war against Zionism we can already see with what's formed out of the PFLP and their united front recently formed with Islamic groups shows that there is definitely going to be a united front with Islam in the struggle against
Oh yeah.
Zionism. There will also be progressive Jewish socialist groups that will be involved in this and Jewish groups in general. This is like, this is getting into the sort of radical and progressive positions these groups can hold in this short term period. And obviously, the understanding of necessary united fronts with what's it, anti-imperialist and anti-capitalist groups that are willing to struggle for the same struggles that we're struggling, but come from a different candor. So long as we're understanding that this is specifically to be united front work and not fucking popular fronts. Fuck off, Dimitrov. But and so like Marxists need to not shun these groups. Marxists should learn from the Marxists of the PFLP and take up the anti and be willing to side with these groups in principled united front. We must be open with our criticism of any group. That's why I haven't hidden the fact that as Marxists, we shouldn't use terminology that religious people would use to describe these places. To us, it's Palestine because Marxism is an atheist philosophy. We don't follow the religious understanding of these places. Even if people who are Marxists themselves have religious beliefs, they have to be put aside. I would question how one is doing that, but there has to be an understanding that takes an atheist position on the situation. However, it would be ultraism to say that because we're taking these positions, that we should isolate religious groups that are taking a progressive position in the struggle against Zionism, apartheid, and fascism in general. And so we have to come together with the groups that are struggling against Israel. This does not mean uniting with any group that you can pick and choose. It's aligning in united front with progressive movements against against fascism. We won't side with any enemy of imperialism because those that want to just turn imperialism into national capitalism are trying to just step things back and not step things forward. We need a progressive movement of national liberation and of revolutionary struggles to be pushed forward because we need the most. If it's going to be a bourgeois movement, it needs to be progressive. If it's going to be any movement, really, it needs to be socialist because it's not going to survive otherwise. But Palestine is in a state and position that is destitutional, colonial, and in many ways semi-feudal. And so a bourgeois democratic revolution is going to end up being something that likely will be at the forefront of its struggles. The working class and the communists as representing the working class need to be heavily involved in this movement so that this revolution can be under political strain from the communists when need be, when we must struggle, when we must be ready for when that bourgeois state instantly turns on us. Look at any history of bourgeois revolutions from all the way back to the first with the British. Oh, sorry, the English. They hadn't called themselves British yet. That was after that revolution failed. The that revolution was a unification of the bourgeoisie, like the actual struggle of it. The bourgeoisie were struggling with peasants, serfs, and disenfranchised folk, people that had been Lumpen-Maoist, thrown off their land, no longer able to be serfs or peasants, the diggers, people like that. The bourgeoisie instantly turned on them. As soon as the diggers were like, yo, we don't want to make a society of exploitation, please. We want the land to be like caretakered by all and free for all to use. They were rounded up and either moved into different places from each other or massacred. King George's Hill was the main area that occurred in, but there was a lot of things like this that happened, and we can look all the way up to this day. There's these betrayals that occur. I mean, we can look at like the Arab coups and revolutions that occurred against British and French colonialists and Italian colonialists in the World War II to post World War II period. Gaddafi's an easy example of one who was like a literal fascist and anti-communist, and they were still part of some that was a national liberation, but it very much quickly turned to pure reaction. And so we need to understand that we can't just support any group that's out there. We have to be very considerate of how we look at different groups, how we unite with different groups, because in Palestine, like if we look at like the PFLP's unification with different bourgeois and petty bourgeois organizations in Palestine, they're knowing that they need to form a united front with this bloc in their struggles to get national liberation from Palestine. Um, no
Yeah,
one said it's the same as left unity. No one.
yeah, yeah. But
Sorry,
I
Net.
mean,
No one, literally, no one is saying that. I'm literally talking
yeah,
about uniting with fucking religious groups, which it's not
like
talking about left unity.
and the situation with Palestine, it is definitely a lot different than it is, say, in the Western world. Like I would definitely say that there needs to be some form of like left unity or something like that within the first world, but we also know that it's right that the
Yeah.
idea of trying to achieve that is going to be near to impossible.
Uh,
Whereas in places like Palestine and and other places, they need to form united fronts in order to achieve national liberation. Once that has been achieved, then we can kind of focus on a lot more of the specifics. But the problem is that right now is that the biggest issue is ending ending the Zionist state, is ending,
that's the big
this
issue for
so-called state of Israel. Yeah.
that's the big issue for Palestine. We have even bigger issues in regards to imperialism that have to be focused on. Um, like that's one of the major issues, but there's so many more. I mean, not a lot of people talk about Yemen anymore, and we have all the genocides in Africa no one talk about. Um, um,
Right.
what's it? What's that country that used to be a French fucking colony near Spain? Um, Northwest Africa.
Oh, yeah,
They've
yeah.
recently been committing a genocide that no one's been talking about. But yeah, no. There are different formulations of united fronts. The ones we seek to form are progressive, so they would be left. However, that doesn't always mean left unity. Siding with fucking liberals is not so much left unity, although in a progressive movement against semi-feudalism, liberalism would be seen in the left position of the Overton window. But internationally
Yeah.
speaking, liberalism to me is a right wing philosophy no matter where you end up finding it because of the progressivity of situations and how the Overton window moves. And so when I'm looking at a lot of these united fronts that could occur in a place like Palestine, for example, well, that united front involves groups that are obviously right wing. But what we're seeking to do would be seeking to make what would be in line with left unity and what we want to do in the first world, because um, left unity is a form of united front, and that's what communists seek to build. Because when you're building a unification of people and the working class struggle, you do not go looking for fascists or right wing liberals. You go looking for liberals that are left adjacent and anything further from there, and you can't be too picky and choosy. It's bringing people together in a united front of the working class. Um, United fronts have historically tried to involve other groups as well, though. The middle class is constantly a part of these formulations in history, and United fronts did historically try and involve bourgeois groups. We can see this with the modern iterations of these things, like what is going on in Palestine. However, bourgeois groups either tend to betray them during the struggle, or they stab them in the back as soon as it's over. And so
Yeah.
united fronts will always end up getting taken over eventually, either by the bourgeois side of things or by a left wing struggle that eventually will emerge organically in this situation. Communists need to be at the forefront of these types of struggles, being ready to represent what comes out of it, whether we come out of it on top or whether we're fucking separating from this front and having to go our own way. Um,
Right. I
uh,
mean, look at kind of how the situation that erupted after the February and October revolutions, that and the resulting Russian Civil War. There was definitely a united front that was created there, but that ended up resulting in civil war, when basically between the liberals and the aristocracy. Uh, versus the Bolsheviks during that time. That was, essentially what that ended up, what that ended up boiling down to.
Well, it was also
But
the
it's like,
bourgeoisie
again,
too, because basically what happened is the whites took power in 1917,
yeah,
and then
yeah,
they
and
got
basically,
ingrained because they're social democrats, which are social fascists, and so they just wanted to continue the war.
yeah, right. And it's just one of those things where it's like, but needless to say, it's like there was, a form of a united front that was initially created to, get rid of the czar. And, and yeah, eventually we all have to go our separate ways, and we will work that out, in whatever way we have to, whatever way is necessary, even if it results in literal civil war. But it's one of those things where, the point is trying to achieve that, that main goal of the liberation of the people first, and then, essentially preserving that liberation, against, the bourgeois forces that will essentially be trying to, sabotage and, bring it back to, well, essentially the way it was before.
Yeah, I mean,
So
it's historically looking
and
that
that's
like
kind of what's going on in Israel. Yeah,
United
or
Fronts have had
Palestine.
to organize with some pretty messed up groups as well in the past, like the Chinese and the KMT. Everyone will go on
Yeah,
about how there's the left KMT that exists. Yeah, social democratism compared to fascism. Great improvement. They were united with the
yeah,
KMT as a bloc, and the KMT was dominated by a crazy fascist at the time. But it's like it was
yeah,
a temporary alliance that occurred to fight against an invader, and this is a similar situation that we find with the United Front we see in Palestine. It is an alliance between groups that otherwise a lot of them want to kill each other, especially like Hamas and the communists. They do not get along very well at all.
oh
But
yeah,
uh but what's it? That united front is for the struggle against Israel, because once Israel is kicked out, these groups can have it out with each other. Who's gonna end up getting power? Because they're not gonna stay fucking friends. At least not for a fucking. At least eventually they're gonna fucking separate. And that's the
yeah,
situation with these things. A united front is understanding that we have a common enemy and that we've got to struggle against that common enemy. But also, as communists, we have to take the anti of the situation that a united front is an advantage for gaining a upper ground in struggle with the proletariat, because united fronts work in the communist understanding. A united front is to be centered around the working class and their struggles and bringing that to the forefront of it. And so a communist's motion in our involvement in united fronts is to bring more forth that working class culture of struggle and bring greater power to working class struggles. We see this in functional united fronts against fascism. Um, the communists that engaged in united fronts instead of popular fronts were the communists that actually came to power through revolutionary struggle. Albania is probably the easiest example anyone could pull out their ass. When we look at popular fronts that disintegrate communists into this one plump group where we're all part of the same org or party, like Dimitrov devised, is death knell. Because what we see in East Germany, Poland, and other places like that is that communism crumbled very quickly. Well, by the 60s, it
yeah.
was dead. Like, like in the political structure, in the society, no, it was still something that was a big part of people's lives. But politically, it was fucked by 66.
Yeah,
And so, uh, the foundations of our struggles and how we can build up off of these situations is through united fronts. United fronts do not weaken our movement, they strengthen it, because we can always be there. We're going to criticize everyone we get in with. I stick up with the quote of Lenin: we'll happily form a united front. However, we're going to be ruthlessly criticizing you the whole time, so I hope you're taking notes. And so we should be like that. We should be putting out there
it
why people are doing something wrong and what it is they're doing wrong and how we would see it done better, and advertising that to the people and showing the
is
better way. And eventually it's going
it
to get
is
to a point
yeah,
where people get sick of the liberalism or even social fascism that we see appear in a lot of groups that we would be forming united fronts with, and they get displeased of it and they move towards our camp.
Right. But essentially, yeah, like you were saying, it's this that Leninist ideal of uniting, all forms of the proletariat, and it's like, even if that, and but like that will mean, in some cases, yeah, having to unite with these liberal and petty bourgeois and fucking, just you know social fascist groups, but at the end of the day we're going to end up kind of going our separate ways. And you know what, it's essentially the whole idea of we will deal with you know the absolute firestorm that will probably come from out of that, but we will deal with that at a later date. It's like, it's not saying that we agree with any of these people. It is the fact that, we're just kind of sidelining our differences until we can kind of
mm,
achieve the goal of national liberation. For instance,
mm,
a lot of people like to compare the Palestinian Liberation Organization and Hamas. And that's the thing. These Palestinian organizations, they are not in any way, shape, or form the same. They are actually very different from each other.
okay,
And,
we wouldn't sideline it though. We would still criticize them brutally and publicly.
well, yeah,
Yeah, our differences would be
I,
open.
yeah. And
Um,
that, and that and that's what I'm kind of getting at with the whole thing with the PLO and Hamas. It's like there's very obvious, very open differences that these people have, and but a lot of people in the West, they a lot of Western liberals and Western academics, they like to compare these two groups, and they're not the same. They're a group that is in a I would say, very loose uh, united front, but a united front nonetheless, in which they are basically fighting for the liberation of the Palestinian state. And once that has fully been achieved, once the Zionist state of Israel has been toppled, then there will probably end up being, a as sad as it is to say, there will probably end up being a civil war between those, a lot of those groups, between the petty bourgeois, between the socialist groups that are there, between Hamas. And, but again, that is one of those things where it's like, that's going to end up being a situation that we'll get to when, we cross that bridge. But in the meantime, these groups are, at least united in some loose fashion uh, for the common goal, and that is, getting rid of the Zionist state of Israel, and establishing, an actual, like, Palestinian nation that is, based on the ideals of, cooperation and equality amongst, the two peoples. And frankly, that
equity.
is the only way that all these people are going to move forward, is going to be, is going to be cooperation. And the people that stand in the way of that, well, in a matter of speaking, they can get the wall.
Um, but yeah, I mean, Carnathius, that would be altruism. So like, United Front is a little more than just like it's not like we're making a united front for this is the socialist movement, because like that united front would be a left united front. That would be like anarchists, communists coming together to form a united fucking well, anarchists and Marxists, they're both
Right.
communists. Anarchists and Marxists forming a united front together and things like that. What we're talking about is wide scale united fronts. Now, in the first world, yeah, you wouldn't go looking for the bourgeoisie because, like, we're the imperialist countries. But in a country that has a semi feudal society, a united front would exist with bourgeois groups at times. Like we see in
Yeah.
Palestine, Hamas is a bourgeois group. But like in our struggles as well, we shouldn't be excluding social democrats from united fronts, even though Stalin is absolutely correct in calling them social fascists. Like,
Yeah,
if they're gonna be a part of it in the struggle against fascism, fine. We just gotta know that they're gonna stab us in the back at some point. If people get in like
exactly.
popular fronts, they're morons. If people turn their fucking back to social democrats, thinking they can be all chill about them, during an active like struggle in a united front, then they're morons. Like at the end of the day,
Yeah,
them being our enemies doesn't mean that we have to take this ultra position where we just completely devoid ourselves of involvement because they're bad. At the end of the day, so are liberals, and so are a lot of groups that call themselves socialist. If we want to get picky and choosy, we could refine ourselves down to literally just ARMLs, Maoists, and ANCOMs. There we go. Good luck doing anything in regards to like Palestinian
right,
liberation, for example. If just the communists and the anarchists united together, they wouldn't get anywhere.
right.
They would split the struggle up, and Israel would take advantage of it, as they have in the past. When the communists had a massive
Exactly.
upper hand and they were struggling by themselves, whom was getting support from Israel to fight against the communists? Groups like Hamas and other Islamist groups. Because that's what will happen.
Right.
Israel, Britain, America, anywhere will sell them weapons, will fucking give them capital to crush a communist movement. Not just because they want the communist movement crushed, but because it crushes the Palestinian movement. And that's sort of the
Yeah.
different things we're looking at here. You have the communist movement and its levels of freedom. And then you also have like the Palestinian National Liberation Movement, and the two different forms that will take candor in. You have bourgeois national demo bourgeois demo bourgeois national democratic revolution, and you have proletarian national liberation, and
Right.
these things can be folded together. We've seen this in places like the Russian Revolution. These things can very much be folded together, and that the proletariat can take the lead of the bourgeois democratic and the proletarian revolution, and the two-pronged nature of how in which the Bolsheviks ascertained to it with their NEP structure, and countries like Palestine are very much in the need of those kind of structuralization of country stability, electrification, and things like that that will allow for Palestine to engage in a socialist construction period. But we can't we can't just sort of kid ourselves and hold ourselves into one sort of narrow view of the situation, because if we were to narrow view ourselves, we could really dig ourselves a hole. The problem, like, let's bring up Syriza from Greece. The problem with Syriza from Greece wasn't that all these different groups came together. The problem with Syriza was they formed a popular front. They all dissolved into
Yeah.
one party. What happened? The Marxists, other than the revisionists, got kicked out. Then anarchists were getting kicked out. And then what you had left was what people were calling anarchists that weren't really anarchists, fucking mutualists and other forms of anarcho-fascists, or whatever the fuck you want to call them. Pseudo-fascists,
Yeah.
proto-fascists, I don't know. Fascists in anarchist culting. Fascists in Marxist quoting, or revisionists, like that bald Greek guy that everyone likes to fucking fetishize. Uh, uh, what's his name?
Oh,
Zizek's friend. Zizek's best buddy that everyone likes to think is a good Marxist, but is actually like shown to be a China-style fascist. Was it Dengis?
yeah.
Um, and then you had the Social Democrats, which dominated. Oh, and there was liberals in there too. And what happened? It collapsed. It fell on its ass. They wanted it to. It allowed the country to become buddy buddies again with the big ol' EU and limit the struggles that were starting to happen, because the Social Democrats were very happy to do the let's fuck off from the EU shit. But then the threats from the EU and the threats from socialist fucking struggle scared the shit out of them. Might I point out that
Yeah.
Greece is a place that to this day still has streets that are ran by anarchists. Like it is in turmoil, it is in devastation. And there's a lot of radical struggle going in to fill those holes. Um, and the what's it? Uh, like there was a lot of precedent for the Social Democrats and the Liberals to get shit scared of the coming radical struggles and movements that are occurring in their country, and they ran straight back to the EU that they wanted to rebel against.
Yeah. See, and here's another thing about Syriza is I actually real like this was going on like what mid to late 2000s and a little bit
It was about
into the
2010.
early, yeah, and then into the early 2010s. And this was before I actually became like a Marxist, and this was when I was kind of going through my, early adulthood, like political transition and everything like that. And even back then, I was like, yeah, there is absolutely no way that this is going to stay purely a quote unquote leftist movement, and I use that term leftist with air quotes because it wasn't really truly that much of a leftist group. It was like you said, it was a popular front, and popular fronts don't really do anything except essentially play into the social fascists and the petty bourgeoisie at the end of the day, and for and that's exactly what happened in Greece. Is that yeah, they started kicking out a lot of the actual leftist circles that were part of that front, and essentially purging people that had radical ideas. And so yeah, things just continued to get worse, and eventually the entire coalition just fell the fuck apart. And yeah, there are it just and that's kind of, honestly, it's not the only reason. I'm not going to blame all of the problems that Greece currently has on that popular front, but they were definitely a large cause of it. And because had it, like at this point, it's one of those things where it's like, had they just left well enough alone and just listened to what some of these, leftist groups had to say, and maybe formed a cohesive plan, maybe they would have gotten somewhere with it. Maybe the country would have been a little bit better off. But no, they chose to ignore them and actually purge them from the coalition. And that's why Greece is so fucked up now. I mean, Greece has been fucked
It
up
was
for a
fucked up
while.
then. Yeah, I mean, this economic turmoil that created this situation.
Well, also maybe hosting the 2004 Olympics really didn't help, either. It's like you're basically a country that's, brokered and shit, and then you're going to host an Olympics. Okay, great. Now you're like indebted to, the Olympic Committee, which, and essentially, which means that you're going to have to borrow loans and shit like that to the IMF, which means that you're going to essentially be shackled to the IMF for, decades, probably, if not a whole goddamn century.
Actually, it was more the
Uh,
EU. They got their money off, and probably the
well,
World Bank because they are technically got a like Greece
that's
has a
right.
strong relationship with the British as well.
Oh God,
Well,
yeah.
the British were the ones that recolonized Greece after, like, neo-colonized to be specific, but they neo-colonized Greece after the war, as America neo-colonized Italy.
Yeah, and it's just either way, the point is that they're going to be essentially indebted. Um, yeah, they're going to be essentially indebted to Europe and other, and essentially the greater Western powers and stuff like that in general, for a long, long time. And it was because simply because their politicians just made some really shitty decisions. So yeah, and this, yeah,
Politicians not caring about the needs of the people. Whoa.
but yeah. Well, even if we look at it on a purely bourgeois standpoint, they still made some really shitty decisions. Like holy shit. Uh, but yeah.
So the country's making money off them. It was good decisions in quotation marks. But the
Uh,
British, the Americans, and the European Union thought they were making absolutely smarty boy positions.
well, yeah, that's the thing. They always think they're making, smart boy
No, no, I
decisions
mean that
instead.
they know that the Greeks are doing stupid stuff, but that it's not stupid for them, is what I mean. So
Oh
they think
yeah,
it's smart because they make money off it. It's just Greece that doesn't get anything off it. But oh yeah, they all
but
think they're very fucking intelligent in what they do. I mean, they're not idiots, so they are intelligent. I mean, no one is an idiot. The idea of idiocy, like people being idiots, is ableist. But like they're not smart. They are very intelligent people. They're just very alienated, and so like what you see with a lot of the, especially the big bourgeoisie, is people that have fucking functional like knowledge about a lot of shit, but they don't know how to apply it in a functional way. Fucking it's the thing with that is like Trump. Trump is like so alienated from reality. He acts like a complete utter fool. He's not a fool
yeah,
though, and a lot of that is actually stuff he purposely does. He's not a fool. He's someone who I would not say is one of the smarty boys of the bourgeoisie, but he's not a fucking idiot either. He's a very smart person.
no,
Like they all
that
are because like they all run empires. Like when you run,
yeah,
so a thing to note: when you run an empire, you become a narcissist. Whether you get NPD or not, it doesn't matter. You become a fucking avid narcissist, and so like
yeah,
you are constantly overlooking your empire. You are constantly engaging in it in this way where you would have some semblance of intelligence. What does it mean for the real world? Not that much usually, because their intelligence is about shit that most people never go through. It's crunching numbers, it's looking at statistics, it's like shit that's meaningless to the grand
yeah,
scope of living. The reason why people like Trump know so much about what I would actually be pointing to as them being dangerous in the knowledge they know is the fact that they know a lot about historical eugenics and fascism and like U.S. nationalistic tendencies and culture. That's
yeah,
something that shows that they are not just like organically intelligent to what they do as an imperialist bourgeois capitalist, which they all are. They all do this. You don't do this and not have a knowledge of what you're doing. Like knowledge is massively taught through action. It's a direct experience point. It's more so that like people like Elon Musk and Trump and Peter Thiel, Robert fucking what's it, the newspaper guy.
oh, what, Murdoch?
Yeah, Rupert Murdoch. That's the fucker. Rupert Murdoch.
Yeah,
These people are educated fucking fascists. Um, and so what we've got to look at is the framework of understanding of the bourgeoisie is kind of bunk in a lot of minds of people because they'll see how alienating they are. A lot of people will determine that as
yeah,
stupidity. These people being absolute nutcases is not because they're stupid. It's because they're dangerous. It's because they are so fucking powerful that they can't see their fucking head from their ass. They're so in their own world that they it's like I use this example for petty bourgeois and bourgeois people. It's like being in different height towers of glass. You can kind of see the floor, but it's really dainty and small, and everyone else kind of walks on it differently to how you walk on it.
yeah. Well, another thing I also wanted to point out too about the whole about things too is that, so first of all, like the U.S. like concept, like the whole concept of like U.S. or American nationalism, I think is just kind of a. I find it really to be just kind of in its own merit stupid, because I mean, granted, it also is very fitting that a lot of American nationalists are Zionists or support Zionist Israel, because essentially their concept, of being is pretty much the same. They're not really, they really exist purely as an idea. And the only reason why they still exist today is because they keep perpetuating this idea that, this is, that this is, our land, this is our, this is our country. And it's like, okay, but you stole this land from others, and then you are, and you are committing, have committed, and are committing genocide against, against these people. You're silencing opposition, and the whole point, the whole existence of your nation is predicated on on false idealism. And that's the thing with American nationalism. America isn't like with Israel. America isn't really truly a nation. It is a
Prison House of
clusterfuck.
Nations.
Yeah, it is a clusterfuck of sovereign, political entities that just happen to exist in some form or fashion as a nation. It is,
Well, it
that's
exists as a
basically the
country.
concept of
Uh,
federalism.
a lot of
Yeah,
people, because a lot of people get confused on this with the Britain. A lot of people think Britain functions as a nation, and that like the UK would be a nation, but these things are country.
yeah,
So like the US is a
yeah,
country, but like it's stolen land, so it's an illegitimate country. Um, what the US is
yeah,
it's a lot of nations crammed together. And there's this myth of the white nation. The white nation is where Anglo-Saxonism and Spaniardism basically dominate. Oh, and Frankicism as well. And they basically dominate the
yeah,
perspective on how to be an American. The Germans used to have a very big forefront in this as well, but then World War One happened, and they basically got told to go fuck themselves. German was actually one of the primary languages of America when it was fucking started up, and Spanish is still technically is a primary language in America. They won't teach you that one at school though. The what's it? Yeah, America is like it's very genocidal towards a lot of groups, not just black and brown people. A lot of white groups get assimilated all the time. I mean, like, it's one of the points we make about like people that identify as like Americans who come from Irish descent. We call them fake Irish people in the Irish community because
yeah,
like, well, they're fucking. If you're committing to Americanism, you're committing to Britishism. That's basically what it is. These concepts are so fucking similar. It's this hodgepodgey nature of trying to suggest it's more than it is. Oh, we're more than just an Anglo-Frankish Spaniard fucking slapped together. Um, uh,
yeah,
and so like uh, the um, uh, what's it the situation with America is one centered around the problems of whiteness. Whiteness genocides everything it touches, including white culture itself. Not as violently,
yeah,
not as aggressively, not as quickly, but it still occurs. This is something that black comrades will be pointing out, and it's uh, it's something that they end up saying a more straight answer on, because the only white people that seem to end up making a big point about this is fascists, because unfortunately people won't make the actual right position on this situation. They'll allow the incorrect motherfuckers to spewing their shit about white genocide. um Whiteness should be destroyed, because that's the thing. When you see fascists talk about how whiteness destroys a lot of European culture, they do it backwards. They say that like they try
yeah,
and point to anti-whiteness as being the problem. They'll point to black people, they'll point to brown people, they'll point to anti-white white people, and like say that they're destroying the white race, they're white genocide. When actually
yeah,
white racial ideas is what's actually causing a decline in a lot of white culture, because there's this idea of the unified white nation, and there's no such thing. There is no
right,
like unified like group of so many different white nations. Just look at the intermingling conflicts in America. America has not fully assimilated everyone from Europe. They've done a lot of it. It's changed a lot since the 30s. Like Italians and tend to be the least integrated out of white groups. And then it sort of flies off from there. But a lot of white groups have been integrated, but like we're talking about America, a country that like happily just presents Irish racism as a haha funny. Oh, let's put leprechauns on our cereals and make a whole fucking film series about them. We'll promote the four-leaf
Like, look at
clover as a
me,
symbol of
they're we
Ireland when the
Lucky Charms.
four-leaf
Yeah.
clover has nothing to do with Ireland. It's a three-leaf shamrock, you fucks. Like, it's this Lucky Charms crap. Oh, me, but buddy, Lucky Charms is bloody A's. It's literally the fucking racist shit they're pushing, which comes from the English. Um, and so like the whole framework is counterintuitive to this idea of homogenous whiteness. It doesn't exist.
Yeah, and that's why, and going back to that whole thing about how it really is just a this hodgepodge of of nations and stuff like that that are basically crammed together in this shit show called America. It's one of the reasons why I have pretty much most of my life, even when I was a teenager, I didn't really, growing up, I never really considered myself or felt myself to be American. I didn't really, I didn't put myself into that, identity that I'm an American and blah, blah, blah. No, I put, I like to tell people it's just like, okay, I was born in California. I live in what is the Pacific Northwest, also known as the Cascadian bioregion. So I like to, so that's why I've for the longest time often say I'm a Californian Cascadian. It's like I know, but you're technically from America. I'm like, yes, if you want to put it into the broadest terms, the country that I am basically a part of is America, but I don't consider myself to be like of that nationality, of that identity. I'm not going to label myself as an American. I'm going to label myself as, as being a Californian born, Cascadian resident. And that, yeah, and if we want to go deeper, it's just like, okay, my family is from Northumbria and Scotland and, bunch of freaking ancestors from France and a few other European countries.
And Normans.
But
There's
I'm not.
Normans involved with this one. Be careful.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. Going, want to go even further back, like my ancestry goes back to the Normans because I'm um not directly, but there is a distant relation to Duke Rollo, who was the first Duke of Normandy, who was born a Dane, and so which I could go into a whole spiel about how that's connection that's kind of forms a connection with my paganism, but it's one of those things where it's like
Anarchist.
I don't. But my main point is I don't consider as I call myself anything from Northumbrian or that I'm descended from Vikings or that I'm a Californian Cascadian, but I'm going to avoid by any means necessary calling myself an American because at the end of the I mean, if I'm having to fill out obviously legal paperwork, yeah, I have to identify myself as an American. But it's one of those things where it's like I don't personally like to label myself as that because I don't I've never felt myself as being purely American because that concept is like again the whole it's a like just like essentially saying that oh I'm an Israeli national. Well, technically is the concept of the Israeli nation doesn't exist. There is there are Palestinian Jews that that land is Palestine. It's historically been Palestine, but it's not, but the whole concept of the state of Israel has only existed because of, bullshit Western interference that goes back to, the dates back from the post-war era. That I think it was what it was car. It was the state of Israel was created in
48.
1947, I believe it was.
The
48, yeah.
decision was signed on in 47, though. There was a whole, like, basically the Palestinians were forced to sign it because, the reason why the Soviets supported it, rather than vetoing it, was because the British were basically threatening to invade if a deal wasn't signed, and the vote basically fell on the Soviets in this. The Soviets could have done something about this, but the Soviets didn't want a war with the British over Palestine, because that's what it would have came to. Um, yeah, the British were planning to do an invasion to get their colony back that they sold. Basically, it's complicated,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
the Israeli the Zionists had like fought for independence off the British. They did a South Africa. Actually, they did a South Africa before South Africa did a South Africa because that was 1952, 53. Um, and like the British didn't know what to do about it. Who do you think was arming the Zionists? Have a guess.
Yeah, yeah,
No,
exactly.
no, have a guess. Who do you think was arming them?
Well, yeah, technically the people that were arming the Zionists were a lot of the Western powers, wasn't it?
It was specifically America against the British. It was America that armed the Zionists.
Yeah,
The
that
French, the
tracks.
French weren't really. The French were too busy trying to hold on to Lebanon. Oh, and
I
the rest
like
of
how
their crumbling
Mark.
empire. Like, it's actually the amount of domination that France still has over its empire is interesting, considering their empire was all they had left during the war because they lost France. Like, that's the only reason they survived was
Yeah,
they managed to utilize their colonial regions in a very abusive and oppressive way that caused a lot of anti-colonial movements to rise up in the French territories. France has gotten financial dominance over so many of their colonies since the end point of this.
yeah. Oh, God. Well, I am actually going to go ahead and sign off because I do got to start getting ready for work. But the main reason for us doing this was we wanted to bring kind of this joint statement um, together and just talk about the issues that we're facing, um, the Jewish Bundist movement, and specifically Comrade Weisfeld, who I know is watching right now. And basically, yeah, I have really nothing really more to add other than solidarity to Comrade Weisfeld and red salute. Keep up the good fight, and because you definitely got a lot of people backing you, even people that have not been involved with the Jewish Bundist movement, who haven't even heard of the intercommunalist convergence, but have definitely um, that have definitely heard of you and your work. And we want to basically just say thank you for what you've done, what you continue to do, and we will stand by you through this difficult time. And also fuck the Zionist lobby.
Absolutely, absolutely. Fuck the Zionist lobby completely.
All right. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and sign off here, but thank you guys for watching, and I'm gonna and yeah, thanks, Cara, for having me on.
Always happy to. Good luck with the deadbeats of work.
I know.
It's like having an untuned drum and trying to play a fucking really interesting song with it.
Tell me about it. It's like every day that I have to drag myself across town to this goddamn freaking place. I always feel like it's like maybe today's the day I just fucking lose my shit. Okay.
Yeah, I feel you there.
Yeah. All right. Take it easy. Red salute.
See you later. Red salute, sister.
Later.
Later. Okay. Let's Biggie the Square. Yeah, so like uh if we look at the there's something else I wanted to say about this and I can't think about it. Um Yeah, I'll end it there because I'm having a bit of a brain fart and I need to go to the bathroom. It's been great coming to speak to you about this all. Come August, when the shit hits the fan and more information comes out, we'll be at the scene to speak about this. And it'd be nice to get the man himself on to have a conversation about this at some point as well. This is an attack against Jewish socialists and their position, and anti-Zionist Jews in general, and their position of struggle against Zionist fascism and its genocide of the Palestinian peoples, as well as its occupation of stolen land. This should be seen absolutely as a direct attack upon these groups and an attempt to silence those who hold intellectual positions within these groups, be they organic or traditional intellectual positions, and the content in which these intellectuals produce. As Weisfeld had said in Statementation, multiple of his books have already been accepted. 3 books, I do believe, was the number, by the library of the CJA, and all of a sudden now they're rejecting his publications on political grounds whilst hiding behind the shield of academia. Um, and so um, uh, the this situation is a situation of anti-Semitism against this against the anti-Zionist struggle, and it's utilizing civility politics as a hammer and fist to crush the voices of those whom have a lot to speak out against them. As Weissel says here, lucky, I've been boycotted for 35 years since working at the Palestinian embassy during the war of 1982 to 85 in Lebanon. That's when I wrote the documentary study on Sabra and Shatila. Yeah, absolutely. This ain't your first rodeo, and it ain't gonna be your last. You know, they've picked a big fish to fight with here, and so you know, all power to you in that, and you're gonna come in crushing, because even if they do end up trying to ladle you with a fine, or disavow you from access to putting your stuff in the CJA library, it's just gonna make you take up the ante and push harder. And as these organized groups come together and push for radical protests that do not respect this idiotic idea of civility politics, the more power that will be developed in the struggle to put the weight on these imperialist powers to oppose any relationship with Israel, in the same way that it did, it's the same way people did during the apartheid period of the latter period of apartheid in South Africa, where the weight of protests put an interest in the First World to uh, put sanctions, restrictions, and dislocations in place in their relationship to South Africa, because the struggle was getting so intense. They had to do something about it. We need that here, all over the imperialist core, where people are losing their shit and organizing in struggles, in protests and riots that take the anti forward in regards to applying pressure on the imperialists to disconnect relations of Israel at all costs. And these protests need to not dissipate the moment that some form of lip service is given. Concrete dislocation of these countries from Israel needs to be acquired in the same way that dislocation from apartheid Africa apartheid South Africa was acquired. Unfortunately, apartheid wasn't ended in South Africa, and so that is another example of failure in that regards. The imperialists took advantage of the opportunism of Nelson Mandela. But in this situation, it is much more diverse than this. Um, in this situation, it requires a much more diverse set of struggle than what we saw in the end of legal apartheid in South Africa. Um, we need to up the ante. We can't just keep being on our asses about things. Action needs to be taken. Otherwise, the world is going to burn into a crisp. Climate struggle is really important for us right now. And if we don't engage in that, we're going to fuck ourselves. And so the world is in a crumbling state, and a lot of struggles are coming up to the forefront. And if we don't organize ourselves and actually struggle for what we need to get done, scare the capitalists into either doing something or fucking reacting in a way where they get themselves off. Like, we need action, not inaction. And unfortunately, everyone is so content with fucking electoralism all the time and not actually engaging in the tools that we have with our own two fucking hands. And that's where I'll leave it, because I'm mincing my words all the time because I'm a bit too brain scrambled, because the only time I could get involved with Pagan on this was the middle of the night. It's 4:25. It's the weed number, so we'll leave it at that. You know, uh, Red Red Solo sisters, envies, and brothers. Uh, Stay safe, stay healthy, stay pretty, and we'll see you soon. I've got a stream I still need to do on Umberto Eco's fascism and his 13 points of fascism. And I also need to do a press release sort of thingy again. Well, it's going to be getting into details as always. ADHD plus information equals tangents. I want to do a coverage of the what's it uh the PCM, the is it Partista Comunista Mexico? I think that's how it's pronounced. Mexican Communist Party. They did a piece on the I think it's like the Anti-Imperialist World Forum, that is absolutely needed to be heard of. Um, Ew, the British. But yeah. Um, stay blessed, stay alive, love, respect, and solidarity.